Hello, hello, hello. Welcome again to another session. I'm your host, Mohammed Abu Bakr. Uh, I'm the founder of M Coach. I also run a cohort based course called Holistic Product Thinking, and I also moderate the Product Circle, which is a community for product people. With me is Haja. Haja is from Curious Ventures. I'll give him a minute to introduce himself. Haja.
Hi everyone, I welcome you back. So my name is Khaja. I'm a long-time friend of Teak here, and on a startup journey itself. Here we are trying to share our ideas together how to build a great startup.
Fantastic, Haja. I think, today's conversation is going to be really interesting. We are building on our previous pods that we had. We will be putting the description or the link to the previous sessions in this video also. For people who are newly joining us, we spoke about what are the fundamental principles to build from scratch. From there, we kind of picked up the idea of conversing with people and conversing with potential buyers and other interested people. So from there, we are trying to get into how we can make product discovery interactions effective and how we can take a very nuanced approach rather than a generic approach. What are your initial thoughts on this, Haja?
Yes, we were talking about uh, uh, mainly about how our frustration can lead us to a discovery of a new product potential, and from there we continued talking about finding familiar voices or finding uh, leveraging existing networks to find out whether the product is really uh, required in the market to find a fit there. So our journey is continuing with that.
Fantastic. So let's say, for example, when we spoke about, let's say you found somebody, familiar voice, you got to know somebody within a company of a problem that you're interested to explore more. What is the first thing that we should worry about going into that interaction conversation?
The first thing is about uh, trying to establish a relationship with the person because uh, you might be bringing a new context into the relationship that did not exist before. It's a new idea. You might have been working on something else, but you are trying to get into a new context with the person to share the idea and to get his inputs. So the context of the relationship needs to be framed towards something that you are bringing newly. So that is number one. Since we are interacting with familiar voices, it's more about the context of the problem itself and not uh, about who you are, what you do, and all these things because it's a existing relationship. We are not talking about complete strangers.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I felt is like even when we talk about familiar voices, there are multiple options here. One is somebody would have given a warm introduction to a person, or you already have very strong relationship with person, or we can have a kind of a relationship spectrum within which you can get to talk to people. Like I said, in our earlier conversation, we spoke about getting to one customer conversation is itself an achievement to say. So from that point of view, we might get anywhere in the spectrum of relationship, and we have to tap into whatever is available in front of us in terms of potential prospect to interact. So that is a kind of a nuance that I want to add to your point. Anything else you would love to talk about?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I was reiterating the fact that we spoke about the 6 degrees of separation, and the more you get further into the separation, the more you have to kind of like establish your credibility about solving the problem at the same time about the problem itself. So I was getting back into the point of saying that as the separation factor between you and the other party grows, basically your conversation needs to have much more added to it when as opposed to talking about the problem solution or the hypothesis of the problem itself.
That's fantastic. Now, uh, that brings me to the next point. What is the purpose of our interaction? What is that we are trying to achieve when we go and talk to a prospect, trying to get to product discovery interactions? What is that we are trying to achieve? Why?
As obviously, uh, we started with our frustration. So we want to validate our frustration, whether it is found in other people also. So that becomes one of the most important benchmarks of why we want to have the interaction. Because without the frustration and without me trying to solve the problem or creating a product out of the frustration, the conversation could not exist in the first place. That's number one. Number two, inspire. Let's say we are having a conversation, we are into it. At the same time, we found that that particular customer prospect does not have a need for the problem that we are trying to solve, or he has something else. So building relationship is also paramount. Building relationship matters because he might not be facing this problem right now, whereas he might face it later, or he might come to know about people who might have problem which is not actually on top of his mind yet. So he actually becomes a referral for you, your product solution at a later stage, though he might not have something that is that he has readily with his hand. So two things are there. One is about problem hypothesis validation. Second one is about relationship.
Okay, I think you touched about two things. One is the idea of why we do what we do is because we want to learn, right? We want to learn. That is one thing that we want to do. Another thing we want to do is we want to build a relationship with the individual. Let's say you want to learn. What are all the things that you want to learn about? Is it just about hypothesis validation that you came up with a hypothesis and then you just want to validate? Is that what your learning is about, or there is more to it than what meets the eye?
Definitely, there is more to the conversation. However, the primary entry point with which the conversation can actually start and kind of like navigate will be the validation of the hypothesis. But can we really go in front of him and ask about, do you have this pain? But that might not be a good idea. Like we need to kind of like maneuver around knowing whether such a pain actually exists. Like we can talk about what what makes him busy these days. What are the things that has recently caught his attention. Something like that. Yes, we are looking for validation of the hypothesis primarily. At the same time, we are also looking for context that is around the pain from the customer's perspective, and also problems that we never thought were existing when we wanted to have this conversation in the first place.
One of the things that I always felt is as people, as engineers, as product builders, I think the thing that drives is efficiency. Because we want to ensure the world adopts a new efficiency, and that's why we are trying to innovate and create a product. But as a business person, if you look at it, business happens between two individuals. So if you ask me, what I will do is that I would love to talk about the individual. I think you have to get to the individual as a person, show some appreciation for what he is as it is today, and then from there we can gather more understanding about what is his context, what are the situations that he is living in, what structures he have to live by, what are the experiences that he is having, bad experiences, great experiences, and what is his expectations from work and life. This is very, very important in my perspective. So the second thing is once you get to the context, then we can actually get into the business. So in a way, you navigate him step by step into your arena from his arena. So it is a natural transition rather than a very, very abrupt transition. What do you think? Do you have any experience to talking to people where you felt this kind of an approach has helped?
I was actually having a conversation with one of my other friends, and
Mm-hmm.
he was around the question I want to change something, or I am having a new idea in terms of building a communication product.
Mm-hmm.
And he has been also kind of like working around with multiple ideas. Some are imitative or some are incremental. Definitely, we can get more into the different types of ideas. However, I kind of like explained to him, like as human beings, let's say we are the age of the 20, 30, 40 or whatever it is, we are already set into a bias. Either it's through nurture or it's through nature. Either we are bound to look at efficiency and the effectiveness in whatever things that we see, or we kind of like got trained into looking at things in a particular perspective. So I told him something like it's my own theory, or it might have been already available out there. I told him, look, you have to know the basic premise with which you try to bring out solutions or problems, like what motivates you. And I told him there are three types. One is a business or a people type, and second is a technological type, and third is a technical type. And I told him, look, if you are going to come from a technological perspective, you always need to understand whether the person has already a measure. Because what I mean by technological perspective is like he wants to make the existing process or business more efficient. So bring out efficiency, the customer or the prospect to whom you speak should have a perspective of what efficiency means. He has to have some measure. Like you cannot hit the prospect out of the blue by saying that I am going to make your sales 100% effective or efficient. He needs to have a premise. So what I was trying to tell him is, we cannot change our basic approach to the idea. At the same time, if you can always choose the kind of like a customers, or evaluate the kind of like the customers with whom you are trying to interact, whether he is really looking for effectiveness of efficiencies is something that you can get to know from the initial conversation itself. So if you really find that he is not into such a mood, then rather than speaking to him more about your idea, better look for some other avenues to build a relationship and come back to him with the discussion that he really would like to have with you.
I think so you are highlighting a very important point. That is, as entrepreneurs, as product builders, uh, time is our most valuable resource. And how can we get to the bottom in the shortest time possible? That's a great point. However, one of the things that I have experienced when you go in for customer conversations is that it will go in very, very different directions, and even though you might have a script, it may not really happen according to the script, unless and otherwise the other party realizes this is a uh, research call, or this is a discovery call, and is a willing participant. So to me, if the person is a willing participant in all this, we can get to the fact of the matter very quickly. If he is not a willing participant, or you are camouflaging your conversation, he comes with his own blocks. He has mental blocks. Now, you have to overcome all of those mental blocks one by one in order for him to open up to having a conversation. So, either this way or this way, it still matters that you have to have this conversation, elicit stories, go diverge a little bit in around places, and then kind of try to arrive at the core of what you're trying to do. And all of this you have to do within a short span of time. Is this what your experience has been, or do you have a different perspective on this?
Yes, this is what I also agree. The point which I am trying to make is, um, don't try to push your customer or the prospect hard on what you want to tell him. If you find that he is not coming from the premise that you are coming from, you better not make him feel that you are being pushy to an idea. Because as we started this conversation, one is about validating your hypothesis or the idea, then second is building relationship. If you become too pushy about our idea and trying to convince him, the problem is you are doing it at a stake of your relationship. So this is where I kind of like say, if you cannot find a connect with the customer, with the prospect in a short amount of time, rather than making him feel pushed, at the end of the day he says, look, I have a meeting which I have to go. It's better that you offer him some exit yourself and ask him for a different appointment at a different time, where you can have the conversation in a way that it might be uh, pleasing for him also. So that's the differentiation which I'm trying to make.
I can't agree with you more. That is 2 points you mentioned. One is like being conscious of the person, the time and value of the person that we are interacting with. Second point you mentioned is listen more rather than speaking. So I think, when we go in for a conversation where we have to learn and build a relationship, valuing other people's time and listening more adds to the overall ambience of this conversation and the relationship. I hope you are getting at that.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So now, let's say, it's very clear that you have to value their time, you have to listen to them more. Now, I will ask you this question. What do you think are prerequisites to a great conversation where you can learn as well as build a relationship?
Okay. The this deals with two things. One is your understanding or depth of the problem that you are trying to solve. That's number one. Number two, about how well you are able to profile the person to whom you are actually having this conversation. If your understanding of the problem is very weak, then you are at the expense of he dismissing you as a waste of time or something. That's number one. Number two is, if your profiling is wrong, like you don't understand the prospect well, like what he really wants, then he feels as though you are dismissing him, which means he feels as though he is not listened to well. So one is about understanding your problem in a particular depth. At the same time, asking the right questions if you don't have such a depth. So it can go both the ways.
I think, that's a great segue into our next conversation. That is, you have to have a deep domain knowledge. That deep domain knowledge has to be coupled with a meaningful conversation in order for continuous win-win in the conversation. That's what you said. Now, if you are a solopreneur without deep domain knowledge, what happens and what are the things that we have to be careful about here?
Okay, we can talk about solopreneurs with extensive years of experience in a particular domain. If the person is having, let's say, 15 or 20 years in a particular domain, maybe even in an enterprise, then this person, first of all, will have a deep expertise in the type of problem that he is wanting to solve and the existing solutions that are already in the market to solve such a problem. That is one of the things. And with regards to the people to whom he is interacting, he'll also have a better idea because he comes with a vast amount of human relationship in the past. So that is one kind of solopreneur, which means a solopreneur who is mature and well bred. That's one. And the second type of solopreneur is somebody who is kind of like fresh out of the school or fresh out of, let's say, the first job or somewhere, where he kind of like starts with the hunch or from a theoretical knowledge of a particular problem. This person might not actually have the knowledge and expertise or the people skills to converse with the prospect. However, he can do little bit of preparation to make it even more meaningful. One of the preparations could be he can find a colleague or a mentor or somebody who can be complementing his experience to have this conversation along with him. Like let's say it's a 1 hour Zoom call in which you have your friend or your mentor to have this conversation, or at least to listen to such a conversation from whom you can get feedbacks that you could not have realized yourself. That is one. And let's say you don't have such a friend or a mentor, then again, one of the things that he can do is he can go online. In these days, he can go online and study about customer experiences for existing products in the market. I'm not talking about theoretical books. I'm talking about real products that are existing in the market and for which people have actually posted their complaints or their happiness. So these two kind of like puts you in a place where you did not build the products from scratch, but there is a product existing out there which is solving X amount of problem, but at the same time, it is still causing some customer pain, which means you can, or customer pain, because these are real people who are using existing solutions. So you can start from there also. So rather than being a blank slate, you can kind of like leverage other customers and other entrepreneurs' experience as an indirect learning mechanism for yourself.
I think that's a great point. Either you have great domain expertise, deep domain expertise, or complement your lack of domain expertise with some other person. It can be a colleague, it can be a mentor. Allow them to participate in your calls and then gather insights from them. That is one thing. Another thing is, like you spoke about, preparing about understanding that domain through a real customer perspective. So that is another way of looking at it. Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, if you are an entrepreneur, if you're a product builder, you can try to disrupt the product, or you try to improve the product. Now, given that kind of agenda that you might have, how important is to have an outside in perspective into the industry? If you don't have that, how important is to bring somebody who has that outside in perspective?
Well, when you talk about the outside in perspective, and I like continuing with the topic, the thing is, in today's world, one is your own hunches about why a product is bad or why a service is bad, and second is leveraging the existing customers' hunches to validate it. What I'm trying to say is, these are indirect feedbacks. Like, you are not putting your face in front of the customer for him to say, no, I don't have such a problem. One of the examples could be like, if you're trying to build an app, let's say for a Play Store and App Store, definitely there will be other apps in the similar domain or somewhat in the complementary space, for which the customers who have already downloaded the existing apps could have given feedbacks. These feedbacks are not something that is gained from a theoretical knowledge or an assumption, but these are real feedbacks given over a timeline of the product's existence. Which means these are the feedbacks this existing company or your so-called competitor is already trying to leverage. So this that your own prospect or the customer might actually give you in return if you have a product or an idea to begin with. So that is something which I try to kind of like talk when it comes to apps and let's say mobile apps and digital products. Another place could be Reddit and other places where people talk about their problems that they are facing with existing software. Or let's even if you go for a physical product like a show, a soap, or like a TV, Amazon, eBay, all these places are filled with customer conversations. What I'm trying to say is definitely before putting our face in front of the customer, either equip yourself with expertise of being in an industry for a pretty long time. Number two, if you don't have the expertise, get somebody who has such a thing because they can definitely give you the inputs that you naturally miss. Third, you gather information and validate with other mentors or people. Look, this is my hypothesis about customers feeling about existing product. Am I right? This is not actual end customer, but actually you are validating your research with your friend or experts in the industry before you get in front of the customer. So it can happen in both ways if you don't actually have somebody to help you in this journey.
Great set of points. One of the challenges when it comes to assumptions as well as opinions is that we have to take it with a pinch of salt, and that's what you are bringing out to the open. Second thing
Yes.
is you have to be in the mindset to validate everything, whether what you think or what you hear from others say. So you are in this mode of constant validation. Third thing is you are trying to connect the dots, hearing multiple perspectives. You are questioning people in terms of what they say. You apply 5 why technique, or you get to the bottom of the core issue that we are trying to address here. To that end, whether you ask many questions, whether you are connecting the dots, whether you are bringing together perspectives, or you are trying to incrementally gain more knowledge on the go, these are all essential for you to have meaningful interactions during your product discovery. That's what we have spoken so far. Is there anything else you want to add here?
One thing I wish to add is your product does not stay in isolation. It either has a team of people who are building it actively, or let's say you are a superstar person who built a product from scratch yourself, posted it, and did all these efforts without speaking to a single customer to begin with. Right? Even then, you have to actually sell your product to the customer, which means you have to. If you did not take pre-research, then actually after trying to sell or give a quotation, you have to learn from that. So it depends on how much far you can go if you are a solopreneur.
Very insightful. That is, either the research has to be before building the product, or you will definitely go through a journey of research after you build the product, because no one is interested in using your product. So why not do the research? Why not do the interaction? Why not do the product discovery upfront when you are building from the scratch is what you are highlighting. That's a great segue to the next conversation that we are talking about. The second aspect is about building relationship. Initially, we highlighted a little bit about this relationship. Do you have further detailed perspective on how we can build a great relationship?
I was reading a couple of articles into uh, building relationships and customers or prospects basically. So it all depends first on where your product idea actually fits into the whole context of the customer. That's very important. It can if it's a totally new innovative product, then your customer or the prospect has to kind of like help you in a totally different manner. Fine. They call something called different levels of pain. There's no pain, there's a latent pain, there is an active pain, and there's a stringent pain. If you actually look at this spectrum, no pain, the person never thought that pain itself does not exist. Like it might be only for you, but rest of the community does not have such a frustration. Latent pain is somewhere where the person knows there is such a pain, like he has some discomfort, but he is not very urgently going to take any measure against it. The third one is called an active pain, where he is looking for solutions and trying to look at how much do I have to pay, what are the efforts I have to take, and something like that. A stringent pain is the person is confident that this pain has to stop now, and he is ready to pay money. So based on where your product falls and based on where the customer is, the whole context might actually differ. For example, if you are trying to build a product from scratch for a pain that is very latent, then you need your prospect also to help you along the journey, because he himself has never experienced that pain, or he's not trying to solve it for the matter. Whereas the same type of behavior cannot be actually expected from a person whose pain is very urgent and needs to be solved now. What I'm trying to say is, your product journey, where you are in your product journey and where the customer is in his, kind of like determines what relationship you both are going to have in the future.
I think that's a great insight. That is, you have to marry where you are in the journey with what the customer has, or where the customer is in the journey, and then find the mapping. If we don't find that mapping quickly, the whole conversation might be fizzle out for both the customer or both the prospect who is willingly participating, and both for you. Now, having said that, when we try to go into a conversation or an interaction, there are only very few things that might happen. That is, you get completely rejected, or the person is completely disinterested. Second thing is, like you said, he is somewhere, he feels that this is something that he thought about, or he was concerned about, or he could actively use you as a way to manifest and journey through his own solution journey. Or if he doesn't see himself in the solution journey, you are talking to the wrong person. He might give you some introductions to other people who have spoken about similar problems, or he might give you introduction to other spheres of influence where this problem is paramount. So, like you rightly said, he can play multiple roles through the conversation, outside the conversation, and ongoingly he can play multiple roles. Being sensitive and present to where he is at, and what kind of contribution we can tap from him becomes paramount in our journey. And my experience has been very similar. When I went for customer conversations, you quickly realize what are their priorities, what are they really worried about, and accordingly fine tune your narrative accordingly. So have you gone into conversations, and have you experienced such a switch in your tone, in your expectations, talking to people? Do you have any experience or anecdotes that you can share with us?
Like one of the recent experiences is trying to build a product that helps in retail sales. And in the whole customer journey, like I could say, product journey, I could say I was in the very nascent beginning. Fine, in terms of both technological powers, and also how deep the product has to actually integrate with the existing systems of the customer. So it was pretty nascent. At the same time, when I actually speak to the customer is also not actually looking for in an active or in a stringent manner. The pain that he understood that the pain exists, but he is not actually looking for a solution. So what kind of like happens is, I myself did not have the supportive background to build a technology or to build an MVP to present him a solution to further validate the idea. At the same time, he also does not have the pain so much that he needs to do follow up. So what is that in the midst of the pandemic, the conversation is lost. So
Okay.
finding this particular what is it? Happy spot is very critical.
Okay. Again, very insightful. Finding that happy spot. One of the points is that we are dating a potential prospect, and through this dating process, we have to arrive at some commonality. Now, having said that, the commonality was not arrived, or you feel that this may not be helpful conversation for him, or you find a lack of interest from him, what is the one thing that we can do in order to sustain the relationship? Do you have an afterthought from that discussion that you can share with our audience?
The afterthought is one thing that actually come immediately is regret. Okay, it could have been still in a completely different manner. And as days go by, we could also find, okay, perhaps I could have asked for the customer's interest in investing in such an idea. That's one. Or if he is not interested, how well I am interested in actually investing in the idea, if I myself don't have the ability to do that. But down the line, what happens is that if you are not there conversing with the customer, you lose the ability to find out other pain areas of him, which could have been solved. Like what I'm trying to say is, we being so narrow-minded with our solution, we might actually lose the customer completely. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to meet the customer again, where will I start? Will I start from the failure of, look, we had a conversation which I was not able to deliver? Or should I actually start the conversation asking him about other problematic areas that he might have, which again, I might or might not be able to solve. So
Okay,
having
great
the
thoughts.
customer in loop and conversation is something that is very important. I could say, rather than focusing on whether you are able to sell the product to him.
Absolutely, I cannot agree with you more. That is, once a relationship breaks down, or gets disconnected, it's very hard to get it back. Now, you have touched a very important thing. That is, we have to value people for who they are, and then have those interesting conversation with the people in a way that they will come back to us again and again. I think that is what happened for me in one conversation with an exhibitor. So we had this 5-10 minutes of conversation where I shared with him a lot of things while I went in for a conversation to validate something. But I shared with him something, helpful for him. Now, what is happening is every time he's coming back to me with questions. Now, I am taking it slow in terms of having the conversation and getting him to the right place. So, this is one way, that is, you make a pull offer rather than a push offer. When you try to push your agenda, it's very, very hard. Now, why do we try to push our agenda with potential prospects? Is that we want to get to validation, we want to get to acceptance faster. The reality of interactions, especially during product discovery, is that it might take months. It might take 6 months, it might take 1 year, it might take more year, even with one customer, to understand and get to the bottom. And that is where, if you want to accelerate that journey, you have to ensure that the potential prospect moves through a journey of becoming a willing contributor. First, he has to become a willing contributor in your journey. Second thing is he has to move from that to becoming a trusted confidant. Third thing is he has to start thinking for you on your behalf so that he can give you some introductions to other people who might have similar areas of pain. And the fourth thing is that he has to become a faithful co-creator with you. In a way, the really good prospects are those who end up partnering with you to solve the problems. Have you had any lessons from the entrepreneurs, the product entrepreneurs of the world, as to something nice has happened for them like this? Do you have any stories that you can share with our audience?
Nothing on the top of my head right now.
Okay, great. So, is there anything else you want to add here before we move on to the next topic?
Yes, in the customers journey that you have mapped out 1, 2, 3, and 4, it's a very kind of like true and as beginner entrepreneurs, we don't kind of like look at customer through all these things. We just want them to jump to step 4 immediately. I think that is where the blood is running hot. Like we want to make sure that we get 0 to 1 as fast as possible. Whereas in terms of the actual products that are in the market, like yes, their success can look overnight for us. Their journey is not actually overnight. So you can take any company. It's not like they started today and tomorrow they become $1 billion unicorn. The thing is, they have cumulative experience of multiple startup failures. When one of the prime examples could be Jack Ma, who said his entire life was failure till Alibaba became successful. So expecting overnight success or expecting your customer to be evangelistic from day one is kind of like a fallacy. To be very specific, if you are going to face rejections after rejections, let's say over a year, then you might yourself not be an evangelist to the solution that you are brought in. When we lose hope ourselves. So expecting a complete stranger to become a co-creator on a day one is a fallacy that most people, including myself, would have. But it does not work like that.
You are, I think, so the whole point is like, when we talk to other people, we realize more than we can share. The thing here is that the realization that things take time, the realization that success is an outcome of multiple botched attempts at success. Success is an outcome of have putting that sternest effort. Success is an outcome of resilience, meaning to say that being rejected, going through this journey of self-doubt. The question here is, through all of this, these are all things that are bound to happen. Now, through all of this, as an innovator, as a product builder, you have to keep your faith high. It is the eventuality. Now, if your idea is bad and you are getting that vibe from multiple conversation, then you have to be adaptive. If you think that your idea is good, but these people are not getting it, then you have to go to the people who you think will get it. That is, you are iterating on the potential prospect rather than iterating on the product idea. In the other case, you are iterating on your product idea rather than iterating on the product prospect. So there are two possibilities here. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. Like this is what I think, or they call it as a pivot. Right? You up with getting an idea first. That's a great thing that you had, because getting ideas itself is difficult, and it requires a great amount of courage to actually validate those ideas. And it requires yet a more great amount of courage to actually know that these ideas are not going to work in the market, and then make a pivot. So this journey is what makes a successful entrepreneur keep persistent. Like, you need to kind of like not remain static, but make sure there is a movement somewhere. Either your product is changing, or your product's channel or distribution, or your entire customer segments changes. But remaining static is the one thing that could cause failure when compared to anything else.
Agreed. Being present to the situation, having a realistic mind, uh, you know, thinking very pragmatically, uh, you have to take decisions. So the most important thing when it comes to conversation with people is that it is going to improve your decision index. It is going to improve your judgmental capacity. Now, while you went into this conversation with an ability to validate hypothesis, the real value is that you are increasing your acumen to make better judgments, to make better decisions. That's what you will get as an output, especially if you are a first time product entrepreneur building from scratch. Even for seasoned entrepreneurs, the journey is going to be almost the same. That is, they are going to become much better. Now, there are few people who are very vision driven, who are persistent, who have succeeded against many customer advices. There are exceptions like that. There are outliers like that. Now, there are normal people like that. You might be an outlier. We might be very normal people. So you have to think or take whatever conversation we are having to your personal context and adapt accordingly. What do you think, Haja, about this?
The most important thing that needs to be understood is, take any product that is existing right now, any product, let it be any successful product, let's say it's Facebook, Apple, or anything. Are you how sure are you that these products are not going to change in the future? None of these products can remain static. If they are static, they are going to be non-existent sooner. And this is all the more the case in which we are talking about products in a turbulent market. When I mean turbulent market, our daily groceries, vegetables or something, they are kind of like a perpetual along with our existence, and they remain like that. Fine. Apple has been happy for quite some time. Fine. At the same time, when we are talking about markets where there is innovation, where there is challenges, where there is new unknowns that come into place, which we never expect, and we cannot expect also, especially when it comes to technology. Who could have dreamed about blockchain existing 20 years back? Who could have dreamed about screen existing before that? The thing is, in terms of a turbulent market, even the seasoned companies, even the established companies that have big pockets, have to listen to the changing trends and preferences of both customer and the market alike. They cannot go with the narrow mindset of saying that my product is already the best product, which does not require any change. So change is something that is constant, and with change comes products and features that are failures, and products and features that become successes. Like there is a website called Google's Dead Products. If you go and look at it, it will have more products in the dead list when compared to the actual products that are in the market. Which means, even if a company is well trodden with the customers and even evangelic and passionate customers, still product discovery, customer discovery, and product success has to go through the same grind no matter what. The only thing is, they can leverage their existing customer, existing technology, existing resources in terms of money to some extent, which a new entrepreneur might not have. But at the end of the day, the journey is exactly the same. Otherwise, these big companies, big giants could have kept on growing without any disruptive innovation from smaller startups. For example, blockbuster movies. It was a big enterprise which was selling DVDs, DVDs to the customer. Netflix was a new kid on the block, and now Blockbuster is not existing, and Netflix exists. And Netflix also faces the competition today, which it might not have faced 16 years before, because now Amazon and all these people are selling video on demand at the throwaway price. Like you buy a subscription for delivery in Amazon Prime, then you get movies also for free. But in Netflix, you get only the movies. So innovation and also knowing your customers' shifting preferences is always going to be there. And whenever there are shifting preferences, then failure is also something that is bound to happen.
I think we are talking about two things here. One is a product you're building from scratch. Or second thing is like, there is incremental product. There is a common commodity in the market, and how market landscape changes. Now, in each of those situations, you still have to continue to be in tune with the prospect or the customer, and continuously innovate. When you build from scratch, you are the only one doing it. Once the product becomes popular, achieves some amount of product market fit, other people come in, and they strategize different ways to acquire customers or pull customers out from your bucket in the established market. Now, getting back to where we are talking, that is, one is we have to talk to people, we have to be present, we have to be realistic, we have to be pragmatic. And one of the things that I have realized with my customer conversations is that when we go and meet people, each of them come in different flavors. That is, sometimes I have gone and interacted with the engineers in a company. Sometimes I have spoken to director of engineering. Sometimes I have spoken to maintenance engineer managers. Sometimes I have spoken to. So the thing here is, in the initial conversation, it is very, very difficult to pinpoint the roles people are playing within the company. So you go and talk to whoever you get a hang on. That is, you try and talk within the first degree. Now, within the first degree, the quicker you understand who the right person to validate your thoughts or your assumptions, which roles are more appropriate to give us a bird's eye top-down perspective, which roles are very good at giving a bottom-up perspective, which roles are giving it a very, very horizontal knowledge. So, and getting to this kind of people and roles who can give all this knowledge, and which are the roles are most appropriate for the assumptions that you have, is very, very important. And that's where who you are interacting becomes very important. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on, what are your experience around talking to different roles within an organization, within a company you're approaching?
I could say that roles are predefined when we are talking about organization or business, but at the same time, roles are present even without a company to begin with. Even when you're speaking to normal individuals, there are people who use the product. There are people who take the decision to spend money on the product. There are people who actually do the research about the product and advise the user. Let's take, for example, the refrigerator. The refrigerator is a commodity or a product that is used by the women who do the cooking, or even the men who do the cooking, to stay away from, let's say, stereotypes. But it is used in the context of who does the cooking. At the same time, the person who is going to spend the money also has a say. He says, look, this is very costly for us to afford now. That is number two. Number three, there might be a child or the child also kind of like looks around different reviews of the products that is given, let's say online, and also influences the decision saying that, look, don't buy this because it has a bad energy rating or does not cool stuff or does not have these features to begin with. So at the end of the day, your product that you are trying to sell is not something that is decided by one person. Even when we are talking about without a family context, the friends and the people whom the buyer is trying to influence, kind of like if you're buying a mobile phone, you might be kind of like looking at, okay, what do my friends have? Because you don't want to look like a fad. So there is roles in any buying uh, circumstance, whether it be B2C or B2B, it's there. And in a B2B, it's much more defined. We definitely know who is going to spend the money, who takes the ultimate decision to actually make the purchase. But if you take a product, the product is never alone when a decision is made to purchase it.
I think great point. That is, uh, whoever you meet, they are not going to make purchase decisions alone unless it is a case of an individual solopreneur founder uh, in exceptional scenarios. Now, even otherwise, he might have an advisor, he might have a mentor. There are many people to a decision. Now, when we start off interacting with respect to product discovery, we might start off with the user. We might think that this person is can give us good insights. Now, user becomes valuable if you are showing a demo or a proof of a concept. When it comes to buyer, they are mostly focused on the transactional value. What is the outcome that they am going to get? The decider, he is going to look at whether I'll get a reputation for doing this, or whether it will fit into my existing relationship, vendor relationship. There could be initiators, there could be explorers, there could be influence. Like Haja mentioned, there is umpteen number of roles involved in conversations or interactions. There are umpteen number of roles. Now, your product, depending upon its stage, depending upon its category creation or a mature market approach, may deal with or may be most appropriate to somebody within the company. Now, how fast we get to that particular person, and how instead of getting to the in spite of getting to the person, how we can continue to be on tab with the other roles within the company makes it all the more important. Do you have any points to add, Haja, here?
Yes, what you said is really appropriate. The thing is, you have to put yourself in the customer's shoes. So that's a whole thing. Like if you are in your business and somebody tries to sell software that you are trying to kind of like, so the product you are trying to make, how could you actually make that decision? Yes. So this is like, could you ask to whom could you ask for advice? Do you make it all or not? The minute you step back and look at, forget about the product is yours and put yourself in the customer's shoes, then definitely the roles that you have to please in the whole process becomes at least somewhat more broader, as opposed to having a narrow view. Like, okay, if I am able to please this single person, then my sale is done. Could you make such a decision when some XYZ company tries to sell their product to you? If your answer is no, then you also have to think about your customer conversations much more broader.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes, now I can
I
hear you.
think, yeah, I think, I was speaking with my mic off. Such a sad thing to do. Or so the thing here is, at the end of the day, what we are trying to achieve is we are trying to incrementally enhance our influence. That's what we are trying to achieve. Now, in order to enhance that influence, we can continue to talk to one person within an organization, or talk to an assortment of people. Now, as a startup, as an early stage, getting to that one person itself might be very hard. Now, if you are successful in building a relationship with that one person, it is possible that the avenues to conversation with other people might open up. Second thing here is, so you can have different levels of influence with different people within a company. That's one thing. Second thing is, like, each of these people come with the different mindsets. Some of them are very emotional beings. Some of them like to talk a lot. Some of them are very reserved. Some of them like are having this pain. Some of them are unaware of this pain. So there is a lot of ifs and buts within the organizational context. Now, for these ifs and buts to be resolved, you need to be really present. Your mindset has to be one of cognizance. It's not only about talking to a prospect, coming back and doing the work, coming back and debriefing yourself or your team, so that you can gather nuances out of this conversation. Because most of the time, I have realized myself is that the discipline to prepare, to do, and then to debrief, and to learn from it and continuously iterate is hard to go by, especially when you are trying to do product discovery. Do you have any experience, any points that you want to add here?
What I could actually add is influencing multiple people as a startup, or let's say a product that you're trying to bring into the market is really challenging. One of the ways you can kind of like reduce it could be to reduce the amount of pain that buying the product could cost. By what I'm trying to say is, you are trying to build a product that actually solves a pain or a frustration. That is one perspective and one side. But if you are going to sell to let's say a user, his pain might actually be resolved. At the same time, another one pain actually comes into the perspective, that is say the person who actually invests the money to actually buy the product. That becomes a totally different pain that you might not be cognizant of. What I'm trying to say is, a pain does not exist in isolation. One pain is connected with multiple pains, and based on the number of subsequent pains that your product can actually bring into, the number of influences to actually make the decision also becomes high. For example, if you're trying to sell let's say a fast car to a teenager, then the immediate pain of the father could be about investment in money, and the pain of the mother could be okay, what happens if something happens to my child. Fine. So the teenager wants a fast car which he can show off. Okay, that is one perspective of looking at the pain. But the process of actually solving the problem, you uncover other pains that also needs to be thought about and solved. One of the ways could be those becomes features. Like I can say, look, you can have this car for free for 1 month, then you can try it out. Then the financial pain is kind of like brought down. That's what most companies do with free trials. And if you say this car is entirely safe, nothing happens to your teenager, that's kind of like an emotional pain that no money or rationality can actually pay, like resolve. So having cognizance about the pain and the related entities around the pain really matters to how much influence you are trying to get within the particular company, or let's say to your customer, and also whether it is more of an emotional or a rational decision that comes along with the pain.
So I think, two great points in your thoughts, Haja, is that one is uh, you have to be very, very specific. I think, very narrow in defining the problem to begin with. Uh, and as we speak to more people, the problem itself might become broader. Your product itself might encompass other things. That is, pains are unearthed incrementally. So if you are really great, having a great understanding of one pain, continue to stick to it, build a product, have the customer adopt the product, and then leverage those kind of relationship to go after other pain areas which might open up through feedback. So I think, we're choosing the initial product discovery with a very, very narrow agenda becomes paramount. Is that what you try to highlight?
Mike, talk was around more around like definitely you sticking to the initial pain and building a product or a service to solve that pain is really paramount. At the same time, when you are actually trying to make the sale or make the customer or the prospect buy into your solution, you have to be cognizant about other pains which you never thought about. So that's what I'm trying to say, because
I
your
think
conversation is bound by those pains also. Let's say a company has been hit badly by pandemic, fine. Their immediate pain is like they don't have any budget to start with, right? Though the pain of you trying to sell the product or the solution is there, they have another big pain to actually deal with. And I can reiterate with another one, kind of like the conversation we had earlier with your exhibition experience. We went to exhibitors to understand whether they need some help with concierge, right? And yes, this is a pain. Either they actively understood it or it was a latent pain. They realized it, but they did not want to solve it. At the same time, you are able to uncover a much more larger pain of having less customer footfall. Like the fundamental thing is, if I don't have customers, then whatever solution that I am going to buy from you does not make any sense, right? So like entrepreneur trying to solve his own that very very specific pain to begin with, that's really the thing that he has to do, because that gives him depth. At the same time, he also has to go around the perimeter around the pain to understand, okay, what are the other potential areas which might crop up once I am trying to discuss my solution with the customer. Because they don't like the solutions and problems don't exist in isolation. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I think I hear you very well. That is, as an entrepreneur, while you might have some hypothesis to start with, the world may lead you to other directions, some of them better than what you have in mind, some of them worse than what you have in mind, or you may not even be able to it. So, having or preparing your mind to be present to incoming signals is very, very important. Being very, very conscious about getting a full view of the landscape that you are operating in, the customer context that you are operating in, and the roles, different roles within that customer context, and the different pains each of those roles give priority to is a great significant aspect of unearthing the full potential within the hypothesis that you're starting off with. That's what I hear you say. Is there anything else, or we are coming to the end of this conversation?
Yes, this one I'm definitely trying to pitch in. Like your learning does not stop with your initial idea. Your learning is ongoing, and your relationship with your customers is also an ongoing thing. Like it's not I sell and I forget, but it's I sell, I nurture, I still validate, and I keep going on, because the solution that we offer today might not be a solution that is relevant for tomorrow. And if you lose track of it, then we miss the entire point of even taking the efforts to build the product to begin with. So that's why I could kind of like close with my thoughts.
So the product discovery journey is a continuous journey. It's ongoing. You need help throughout this journey. You need to be cognizant throughout this journey. You need to be present throughout this journey. You need to be nuanced throughout this journey. Only when we are able to do it, we can get to much deeper meanings within the customer context and identify opportunities. Now, having said this, I think the whole goal is that you have to influence established circles. You have established circles, that's what you try to influence. And then there is specific empathy you have to deploy. That is, when you are talking to a user, you have to talk in a different tone, different style. You are talking to a designer, different tone, different style. You are talking to an influencer, different tone, different style. That is, as entrepreneurs, as product builders, we have to build this capacity to understand signals and communicate according to the situation, rather than going with the monotonous idea of what we want to achieve. Now, if this is if you have learned this much, it'll be great, for you as well as for us. If you have any feedback, you can share with us. If you have any other thoughts, any other topics that you would like for us to talk continuously, I think give us those feedback and suggestions. And we really appreciate you staying throughout this journey and listening to us. And hope you can apply something in your product discovery interactions. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.